It was just last week that it hit me how much better I wanted to get at producing the videos on this channel. Hit me like a ton of bricks, and so this week I want to do something a little different. Today I want to journey into the evolution of the methods of sanitary feminine care. Now that we're here, I'm casting a thought back in time. Let's go back to the very beginning. So how did the women through the ages deal with that time of the month? The truth is, for much of the past, we just don't know. But I read somewhere that European women in the 18th century free bled into their garments. Turns out rags were the better alternative. If sis would have just reached out to my grandmother's mother's mother, we could have given her the tea, because according to a conversation with my mother, I just wanted to find out from you, how did you, but more importantly, how did the women that you knew, like your mother for instance, and maybe your mother's mother, how did they take care of themselves, and babezikhathalela kanjani when it was you know, that time of the month for them?
As I've said, we come from a place and a space. We are bound to used to use whatever they had. But I know stories of newspaper to cloth. So in my mother's case, what I saw growing up was cloth being used and washed and, you know, being reused again.
Yeah.
So with my mom, that's what I saw. She had a number of them that she made and was using that.
Okay, and then let's come to you, because we're moving. I'm taking a journey and I'm kind of investigating how women took care of themselves through the ages. So now let's move it to the point where you get your first period. Please walk me through what happens when you get that first period.
Okay, with me, okay, let's talk about my mom. My mom told me, as I've said, that she hid this fact from her mother, and because of the misinformation.
And the misinformation was that?
You only get periods if you had slept with a man.
Okay.
Or a boy in her case. So she hid this from her mom, and she was confused as to how this happened because she had never done that. Yeah, so she was anxious as much as...
Okay.
Yeah. So with her, that was her. With me, I also hid this from her. But because of how close we were, it was difficult for me to hide that. And also because of how our homes were. As I said, we had this thing of not going outside at night because it wasn't safe.
Because the toilet was actually outside.
The toilets were outside. So because of that, we had to get a bucket and put it inside the house. And the way we were at home, you would use the bucket to pee, or whilst other people are around, it was not something that you would do in private.
So difficult to hide.
There was almost no privacy. So so we were in the room with my mom, all of us, and then instead of me using the bucket, I took the bucket with me to a different room, and my mother followed me, and my mom, when she came into the room, I threw, in this case, toilet paper, because I had not reported to anyone, or toilet tissue. I had not reported to her that this has happened. So when my mom entered the room, I threw this toilet paper in the bucket, and my mom went with her hands into the bucket, and my mom told me that she did not tell me, she was actually like, if you dare sleep with a boy, you'll get pregnant. And that was the end of the conversation.
That was very warm.
yeah, that was the end of the conversation. I didn't ask any questions, but from that point on, she bought sanitary pads for me.
Okay, so the question I asked before, I remember because of that line that you just said is, so we talked about how women used cloths before the commercialization of pads and sanitary pads and menstrual cups that are now becoming popular, da 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 da. So what I'm trying to understand is the timeline of the evolution. So that helps me because I know that, you know, in late 70s, there was not, I don't want to say widespread access to disposable pads. Let's talk about that. So what would be, how accessible would those have been in the late 70s to, in the community that you were a part of and growing up in, to the other women that were in this community? How accessible would those have been at that stage?
Depends. It would have differed from one family to the other. I grew up at a time where most people didn't have that much money and priorities. But I would be lying if I said I knew, access or accessibility, or whether people were able to actually buy. But I just know that my mom and the people around me, in terms of my family, extended family, especially from my maternal extended family, I knew that they were able to access such things because I had seen my cousins using pads.
Okay, thank you, Mom. Ancient methods of pain relief included natural herb remedies like lemon balm, motherwort, black cohosh, and practices such as vaginal steaming. Concerns about bacterial growth from inadequate cleaning of reusable products between wears created a new menstrual hygiene market. The first disposable sanitary feminine care products appeared on the scene in 1896 as a result of technological innovation following an earlier innovation called rubber pants, underwear lined with rubber, and also what were known as Lister's towels, an early version of maxi pads. 1896 happens to fall along the spectrum of the scientific revolution marker on the timeline of the evolution of humankind. It only took the friendly beast of capitalism 300 odd years to enter the chat. It's no coincidence that disposable sanitary feminine care products appeared just as the Industrial Revolution had established its roots in the trajectory of the human landscape. Just 56 years after the Industrial Revolution had taken its closing act bow, boom, convenience. There's still absolutely nothing convenient about this biological process, but it's not hard to see why any ideas and innovations around making this messy process more tolerable and livable would be popular. Today, menstrual products are a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's extremely annoying to think that someone's making money off of this extremely inconvenient problem I have to deal with. But I also haven't really decided how I feel about free bleeding yet, so there's that. How much of what's being produced, packaged, and sold to us is compostable or environmentally friendly? I think I'm creeping up on peak millennial status here, but stick with me. I first asked this question when I found out the hard way that not all tampons are flushable. I felt stupid for making that assumption, but no other method of disposing of a tampon made sense to me. So then, where does it go? The fact that I have to think about this at all is deeply annoying and, inconvenient. I'm annoyed. I'm reminded of a quote from Sapiens wherein Mr. Harari says, one of history's few iron laws is that luxuries tend to become necessities and to spawn new obligations. I'm also cautious in my analysis because I'm reminded that there's a fine line between analysis and high and mighty righteous status. But is there a way to mitigate waste and stop fueling the friendly beast. This should all be free, in my opinion. Let's take a second to consider for a moment just how expensive keeping up with this biological process can get. How can we ensure that women, sometimes as young as 12 years old, can be guaranteed an inexpensive approach, seeing as we're a long way from free access to these products? Then I'm challenged by more of Mr. Harari's words when he says that the romantic contrast between modern industry that destroys nature and our ancestors who lived in harmony with nature is groundless. Long before the Industrial Revolution, he argues, Homo sapiens held the record among all organisms for driving the most plant and animal species to their extinctions. We have the dubious distinction of being the deadliest species in the annals of life. The truth is, there is no absolute way or solution. We're all just doing our best to figure it out as we go along, whilst trying to make the best decisions for ourselves, our future selves manifest as our children, and Gaia herself, the planet. What if you only needed to invest, and I use this term very loosely here because there are no returns, but what if we only needed to spend 300 rands every 4 years on sanitary feminine care products? Am I an idealist? Maybe. But what if those of us who could spare 300 rands could purchase this kind of peace of mind for a woman who's stuck in survival mode without the luxury or the privilege to consider or think about any of this? Enter the menstrual cup. I'd seen and heard about menstrual cups, and now seemed like a good time for alternatives. A little reusable silicone innovation that cut costs and waste. In my research for this video, I was surprised to find that these were not a new invention. An earlier imagining of the menstrual cup between 1854 and 1935 was made of aluminium or hard rubber. It surprises me that this product wasn't commercially successful at first, given its cost effectiveness, but then again, not so surprising, considering this might not be the best option for commercial business, seeing as it would be a once in 4 years purchase. It's not until the 2000s that these became more widely known. Let's come back to the now. When I first unwrapped this, I wasn't really sure what to expect. I was annoyed, I was huffing, I was puffing, and I was nearing tantrum status because of the novelty and the discomfort of it all. Inserting it was kind of an uncomfortable process, but that might just be because I got it in a large, maybe not. I also noticed that I had to change this every 2 hours on heavy flow days, and let me tell you, having to come up with a clinical remove, rinse, and reinsert technique only further aggravated my annoyance, as I thought about how, in general, this is a messy process in itself. And then, of course, there was the spotting and having to manage and deal with that. Here's a tip. Make sure that you have a bath or a sink or a rinsing situation that you can access while you are sitting down on the toilet. So I underwent an attitude adjustment. I negotiated with myself, and in my new approach, my positive approach, following my attitude adjustment, I noticed that I felt more freedom of movement, the feeling of fullness that you feel when it's time to remove and change your tampon, or the feeling of discomfort and dryness that you feel on the very last day of your period where there's less lubrication, really wasn't there. So that was a plus. I want to make it clear that this is not a dream or more desirable, less difficult way of getting through a period. This just represents a different idea or approach that I align with. Cutting cost and waste seemed like a good trade-off for my momentary discomfort. So I adjusted my attitude and my approach, and it got progressively easier as lubrication increased as the days passed. I got into a clinical flow. Thank you so much for watching this short film. I'll see you in the next one.